All right, good morning.
Good morning.
Happy Sabbath.
Happy Sabbath.
Let's grab my mic. Well, my name is Daniel. My last name is pronounced John, like you would say fun, except the J. Right, so John. And so a little bit about me. I'm the associate pastor at Dalton Seventh-day Adventist Church. The pastor asked me to come and preach here after I preached at Battlefield. And we were there with more people, but there were some schedule changes that happened unexpectedly, so they couldn't make it. But Grace was able to come and grace us with beautiful music. And so let's just go ahead and pray before we start. Father, Heaven, thank you so much for this good Sabbath day. And as we open your word, you will open up our hearts. May we leave from this place knowing that we met you and that we are able to make you known for the rest of the week. In Jesus' name. So today's sermon is entitled Cliches. Cliches. Now, English is my second language. I started speaking, learning, not speaking, when I was 10 years old. I spoke Korean for the first 10 years, and I still speak Korean. I would like to think semi-fluently. And I'm also married and have a baby boy back there. You look in the back of the mother's room, there's a little guy not knowing what's going on. That's my son. But I titled today's sermon Cliches, because personally, I do not appreciate cliches. Because you cannot learn anything by cliches. I mean, try to tell me how you would explain the phrase, "you're pulling my leg," to a non-English speaker. You can't. Cliches cannot be translated and still retain the meaning and purpose for which it stands. Right? Cliches are difficult. And I found on our website, editorsblog.net, 2011, January 26th, cliches. Are they really that bad? The consensus is that cliches are terrible. But it goes on to explain that cliches are overused expressions that at one time might have been original. Right? We all know what they are. And they're like someone else's words brought into a new plot. Cliches may not fit the character, the setting, the era, the social background of the story, or the genre. Right? We take a cliche and put it into our writing because we think it explains an idea, but it doesn't really belong there. Because cliches is like wearing someone else's old and dirty clothes. They might have looked good at one time, but they don't look good anymore. They don't fit right, and they don't smell too good, and they do nothing to improve your looks and bearings. Right? That's what cliches are in regards to writing. But let's look at some Christian cliches. Believe in Jesus. Right? But we say that a lot, but we don't understand the fact that people that are hearing that for the first time have no idea what Jesus is. Or born-again Christian, like how are you born again? That's like Nicodemus asking Jesus, how can a man be born again after he's old? Right? But we use that a lot and still think that people understand it. Or let go and let God. How do you do that? Right? How do I let God? Or God will not give you more than you can handle. We use that when we say that a lot. But if I'm going through something that I feel like I can't handle, then God must not exist. Or God helps those who help themselves. Then I could be selfish. Right? These are cliches that we use all the time. Washed in the blood. That's pretty disgusting. And I watched my boy being born, and I can assure you, blood coming out and is not very clean. There's nothing clean about it. And or things like cleanliness is next to godliness. And the fact is there's plenty of clean sinners. And they're the furthest thing from godliness. Or if it is God's will. How do you know? How can we know that something is God's will? Or God said it, I believe it, that settles it. But for somebody that doesn't know God, it doesn't really settle for them. And furthermore, about some Adventist cliches, since I've come into the truth, right? What is truth? Or the three angels message. The question is, when they preach, right? Who are these three angels? Righteousness by faith. Being righteous is a good thing because for the non-Christian, being righteous is oftentimes associated with being snotty or holier than thou. Or we have to preach the health message. How do you preach health? And we say, we read Ellen White, but when non-Christians hear Ellen White, they're thinking of the soccer player, right? Or present truth. Is it truth, right? Truth is a present. So we say all these things that we think make sense to us, and we kind of talk amongst ourselves. Eventually, we come to the point where even if we don't understand it, we pretend like we understand it, right? Because we want to be in the in crowd. Right? We don't want to be that guy that's been coming to church for 10 years and not know what the church members are talking about. So we say things like, I believe the present truth, or since I've come into the truth, but all these things, we really don't know. If not, if we think we know what it means, it's usually all different, right? What we think cliches mean are very different. And what this does to new believers as well as young people, it confuses them because anything that's not defined properly will not be understood. And young people are leaving as well as new believers are confused because they think if I can't understand it, then why would I believe it? And Christianity, Adventism, must not be for me. I saw this little comic that said, I eliminated all the platitudes and cliche statements from your mission statement, and I'm left with this blank sheet of paper. Nobody appreciates cliches. But how often do we get comfortable with our Christian Adventist cliches? And I want to attack today what I believe is the most significant, but most misused cliche in Christianity. And that is this idea of believing in Jesus. What does it mean to believe in Jesus? We may have all these different ideas. Right? We may say, believing in Jesus means to keep the Sabbath, because Jesus says, if you love me, keep my commandments. Right? Or believing in Jesus just means believing in Him, right? A lot of Christians out there will say, all you do is believe in Jesus and you'll be saved. You're not saved. There's no need for lifestyle changes. There's no need for baptism. Nothing else matters because all you have to do is believe in Jesus. But what has that done for Christianity? What has that done for the world? Right? We have developed a generation of Christians, quote unquote, who believe in Jesus, but in practice they're denying Jesus every single day. Because they have come to believe a cliche that they think they know what it means, but their lives show a different picture of it. Because you cannot claim to believe in Jesus, but hate your neighbor. Right? You cannot claim to believe in Jesus and dislike people that do not think, act, or smell like you. Right? What does it mean to believe in Jesus? Well, I overheard a conversation between an older pastor and a younger pastor. And the younger pastor said, Pastor, what is the relationship between our 28 fundamentals, right, what we believe is Seventh-day Adventists, and salvation? Valid question. Right? And I was wondering what he would say. And the older pastor simply responded by saying, my Bible says all you have to do is believe in Jesus. And I was like, that didn't answer the question at all. Right? The kid was not left with any more clarity on what it means to believe in Jesus. And we can't do that. And if that's our pastors, there are major concerns for our church. What does it mean to believe in Jesus? Is it okay to leave it as cliches? Because if I, learning English, couldn't be helped by cliches, and it's just a language issue, right? But if we can't explain to our new believers or to our young people what it means to believe in Jesus, we're in a big, big mess. Because just like that person, I eliminated all the platitudes and cliche statements from your beliefs and left the blank sheet of paper. We don't want to do that. So what does it mean to believe in Jesus? Because the question is, how am I saved? Because, yes, I believe in Jesus, but what about the state of the dead? What about Ellen White? What about the law? What about the Sabbath? What about baptism? Right? What about the investigative judgment? What about time? Right? This is a question that we have. If all we have to do is believe in Jesus, what do all these other things mean? Is that a valid question? Right. So we're going to do our best to tackle this today. So this is one approach that we take. Jesus is all you need. You don't really need doctrines. Right? You don't need doctrines. That's like saying all you need to do is get married. Well, a marriage license means nothing. Right? That's ridiculous. Right? But that's where we have come to for many Christians and many Adventists, right? A lot of people believe that you just need to believe in Jesus, doesn't matter what other things you believe. But is that correct? Or, we don't want to say this, but this is often what we mean, right? All you have to do is believe in Jesus and keep the Sabbath, pay tithe, and this and that, and the list goes down. As if everything else is salvific in nature. But the Bible is very clear that we cannot add anything to our salvation by anything we do. So we will not say Jesus and other things, but this is what we often resort to. Jesus is the only way, but you should keep the Sabbath. But you should pay tithe. Because otherwise the church can't function. I can't get paid. Right? So we say Jesus is the only way, but this is this. That's the usual response. But what can we do? Salvation doesn't come from good ideas or from good preachers or good books. Right? It's easy for us to build our Christian experience based on some books we've read, right? Whether they are Christian or not. Right? Or we recite things that certain preachers have said, whether that's Doug Batchelor or, I don't know, whoever you may listen to. Or maybe Joel Osteen. But what does Peter say? In 1 Peter 3:15 it says, but sanctify Christ as Lord in your hearts, always being ready to make a defense to everyone who asks to give an account for the hope that is in you, yet with gentleness and reverence. There's a few things that is talked about in that verse. First is sanctify Christ as Lord in your hearts. Right? That's the most important part. That Jesus has to be the Lord of your life. Right? And then he says, always being ready to make a defense, right? To everyone who asks you. Now catch this. Everyone who asks you to give an account for the hope that is in you. Right? It's not saying, like, when somebody asks you to say, I believe in Jesus, right? That's the hope we have, right? Because we've sanctified Christ in our hearts. That's according to the verse, right? And then, but we need to make a defense to give an account about the hope. Do you see that in the verse? Right? So it's not just about telling people, I believe in Jesus, I believe this, but we must take a step further and say, this is why I believe in Jesus. Is that clear? But not in a snobby or holier than thou attitude, but with gentleness and reverence. Right? So there's a 3-step process. Sanctify Christ as Lord in your heart, get that over with, right? And then be able to be ready to give a defense about the hope that is in you. Right? That's very important. We're gonna unpack that together. So, yeah, I just talked about that. So the idea of giving an account. Giving an account. Anybody here works in finance? Nobody.
I have.
You have, okay. All right. I'm learning, I do not know much about finance, so I'm reading different books. I have a list of, I think, 100 books I'm going to read about finances. I'm doing pretty well. I think I've done, 2. Right? I'm doing very well. But this idea of giving an account, a proper account, is extremely important. Finance too, but history as well. Because if we give a false account or some well-rounded accounting in history, this causes problems. This is a memorial of the Nanjing Massacre, or the rape of Nanking. And it's an episode of mass murder and mass rape committed by the Japanese army during World War II in China. And they say numbers range from 40 to 300,000. Terrible. Now, to this day, the Japanese government refuses to give an honest apology for what they've done. They changed history books to say that instead of conquering China, they kind of walked into China. Right? And so they changed things on a false account to make themselves look a little better. And does this cause problems? Yes. False accounting, inaccurate accounting in regards to history brings about negative results in relationships. And I think a few months ago, or a year ago, the Prime Minister of Germany went to Japan and rebuked them publicly for refusing to accept their wrongs as they had done, Germany. Right? They said, in order for you to take a step into a positive relationship with those around you, you have to acknowledge your wrong. You have to give a proper account. Now here's somebody else that gave just false accounting, just round numbers, right? Who is he? Bernie Madoff, right? And somebody said, like, these people were stupid. Why did they give money to somebody that had the name Madoff? Right? He made off with their money. But estimates are around $64.8 billion wasted because they came to trust him. They came to trust his account. So if there are serious consequences for history as well as financial accounting, wouldn't it be fair to say that there will be serious consequences for spiritual accounting? If we don't give a proper account of what it means to believe in Jesus, we cannot know the full extent of the consequences. Albert Einstein, one of the smartest people that ever lived, right? He says, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. Now, I'm not saying that you can't explain things in an easy way, right? But simply, right? It means to condense it enough where the person can see where you're going with it, and they will want to learn more about it. Right? Because there's no way to give us easy explanation about how the rockets are shot into space, right? But you can make it simple enough for a child to take interest in it that he can go in the right direction. Is that fair? Right? And we've all said this before, things like, I know it, but I just can't explain it. Right? I just can't explain it to you, right? I understand it. But according to Einstein, if you can't explain it, and it doesn't matter what you think or feel about the topic, you don't know it. Right? And that's something that we're not willing to face. Finance and history shows serious consequences for inaccurate accounting. And this is what we are looking at when it comes to our spiritual accounting of what it means to be. Because that's up there as us, right? Our accounting. And this is the question. I mean, that could be a young person, or that could be a new believer, or an interest, right? So they ask, what does it mean to believe in Jesus? And if we give a vague interpretation or vague accounting, that could lead to eternal death, right? But if we give them a clear answer, that could possibly point them in the right direction. Now, it's not just me saying this, right? The Bible says, Jesus said, whoever believes and is baptized will be saved. This is Jesus, right? But whoever does not believe will be condemned. There's no middle ground. There's no space for us to give vague accounts and hope that things will turn out for them. No. Right? It's either we give a clear account, and that leads to them wanting to know more about Jesus, or we give a vague account and could mislead. Is that clear so far? Yes? No? All right. So Jesus, right? And the New Testament is all about what it means to believe in Jesus. John 20, verse 31 says, but these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. The writer of John the Apostle, his main concern, his number one concern, and only concern, is that people come to believe in Jesus as the Messiah. But if he gives a vague account, what hope do we have? We believe that his accounts are correct. And Paul writes, for I determined not to know anything among you, nothing among you except Jesus Christ and him crucified. This is Paul writing. He says, this is the only thing I'm concerned about. Is that you have a correct understanding of who Jesus is. Is that clear? Right? And Jesus is the Messiah. But what does it mean to believe in Jesus? That's what we're going to tackle today. There's so many things that we could look at, but today we're going to look at one argument, and that is Jesus' own testimony after he comes back from the dead. Right? This is not me talking, this is what Jesus says about himself. Right? And so Luke 24 is the walk to Emmaus. Let's turn to Luke 24 today. In our Bibles, Luke 24. Matthew, Mark, Luke, New Testament. Luke 24 and verse 13. Luke 24, verse 13. Many of us may know the background to this passage. Jesus had just died. Passover is past. But as we know from looking 2,000 years ahead, that Jesus had come back to the grave. But these two disciples don't know that. Right? So they're not in the best mood, so to speak. So in verse 13, and behold, two of them were going that very day to a village named Emmaus, which is about 7 miles from Jerusalem. This day we don't know where that city exactly is, but that's not important. We just know that it's 7 miles away. And they were talking with each other about all the things which have taken place. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself approached and began traveling with them. But the verse says, but their eyes were prevented from recognizing him. I want to ask you a question. At this place right here, why do you think Jesus did not reveal himself to his disciples? Because in life, the most important asset that we have is time, right? Time is of the essence. And so Jesus could have saved all the discussion. He could have said, hey, I'm alive. And that would have been enough for them. Right? It would have been enough for them to know that Jesus was alive. But the verse says, but their eyes were prevented from recognizing him. Why do you think that is? Moving on. And he said to them, what are these words that you are exchanging with one another as you're walking? Jesus asks them a question. Now, does Jesus not know what they were talking about? Was Jesus ignorant of what they were talking about? No, right? He knew. In the Bible, God asks many questions. The first question that kicks off the Bible is, where are you? Right? Jesus asks Adam and Eve, where are you guys? Is it because he didn't know where they were? No. It was to help them think about where they were. Right? How did you get there? When in the Bible, when God asks questions, it's to help us think. Right? So he asks, what are you talking about? And they stood still looking sad. One of them, named Cleopas, answered and said to him, are you the only visiting one in Jerusalem, unaware of the things which have happened here in these days? Like, are you crazy? Like, didn't you see? It was the biggest thing in town, right? Jesus, the Christ, was crucified. And Jesus still acts ignorant. And he said to them, what things? Right? And it's not because he doesn't know, he wants them to think. And they said to him, the things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed, and word in the sight of God and all the people. Now the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to the sentence of death and crucified him. Right? So they just kind of spilled the beans, and this is what happened. We're not very happy, basically. But the question still exists. Why did Jesus not allow them to see him for who he was? Moving on. So in verse 25, right? Verse 25, he says to them, Jesus, O foolish men and slow of heart to believe in all that the prophets have spoken. Was it not necessary for Christ to suffer these things and to enter into his glory? He kind of turns the question around. He said, basically, everything you said about him is true, but that's exactly what the prophets said would happen. Right? And then, this is the most important verse, in my opinion. Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them things concerning himself in all the scriptures. So Jesus, instead of telling them, hey, I'm Jesus, I'm alive, everything's great, right? Don't be sad anymore. Instead of doing that, he asks some questions, makes them think, and then after that, the verse says, then beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them the things concerning himself in all the scriptures. So he doesn't tell them who he is, and he takes the time to give them what? A Bible study. A Bible study. Now hold that thought. This, I don't know if you can see it, but this is a 6-volume Reader's Bible, right? And it's made this beautiful. And the letters are pretty big, and it's a minute a page, so it's really easy reading. And this is about 3,364 pages. So it's a big book. And honestly, in my life, buying that book was the greatest thing of my life. Right? I fell in love with the Bible in a whole new way. Right? But that's for another topic. So that is the Bible. Well, of course, we look at the Bible as very condensed, compacted into all these pages. But if you were to spread the pages out a little bit, you get 3,000 pages. And then, this is how big the Old Testament is, and this is how big the New Testament is. Size comparison, right? We think they're about equal because there's 27 and 39, right? But if you spread it out, what's the difference between the Old Testament and New Testament? Is that a significant difference? Yes. So why is the Old Testament so big, right? The Old Testament tells us which Jesus to believe. Right? So the baptism, the law, state of the dead, Sabbath, spirit of prophecy, investigative judgment, which are all found in the Old Testament, Jesus said, "There are they which testify of me." So Jesus does not tell him who he is right away, but instead points him back to the Old Testament. Right? And says, "They are they which testify of me." So basically, without the Old Testament, we cannot know which Jesus to believe. Let me move on further. Because ignore the Old Testament and you just focus on the New Testament, you are at the mercy of your best guess as to who Jesus really is. Because if you just have the New Testament, if you just have the 4 Gospels, you have a really nice guy that came to earth, was born as a baby, right? And lived life, did good things, and died. But some people believe he came back to life, some people don't. Right? If you have just the New Testament, that's all you are left with. But the Old Testament gives us the prophecy, right? Gives us the foundation on which the Jesus that we believe in can have a clear picture. Because Jesus in the New Testament is the fulfillment of everybody's hope in the Old Testament. Let me just try to paint this in a different way. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he questioned his disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" Right? It's a valid question. Who am I? And this is the answer. They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others, Jeremiah or one of the prophets." Right? One thing is for sure, no one knew who Jesus is. Right? They didn't know what to make of it. "But what about you?" Jesus asked. "Who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Right? Now let me paint this in a new light, right? Jesus, what is he like? Some say that he burns people in hell forever for about 50 to 80 years of sin, but some don't. Right? We don't teach that God burns people in hell forever, right? And some others say that we should worship on Saturday, whilst others say it really doesn't matter. Some say the law was nailed to the cross, while others say it is still binding. Some say that he makes investigations, while others say that he saves and burns whoever he wishes. Without the Old Testament, there is no way to know who Jesus properly is. We have no idea. Right? Because without the Old Testament, the New Testament Jesus becomes just a nice guy. But amongst all this, but most, if not all, require tithe and offering. Now that's one thing that all the churches are clear about, that we should pay. Right? But here's the thing. There's really no way to know. Because your guess is as good as mine. But the dangerous part about that is that no one will be saved. We cannot believe God the way we feel like believing him and expect to be saved. There's only one Jesus. The Bible is clear about who he is. Moving on, these are the 28 fundamentals. Right? These beliefs that we have teach us how to spell Jesus properly. Right? Jesus could look that way. I mean, English is a terrible language, so it doesn't matter how you spell things as long as you read it that way. Right? So you can say my name is Anne with a Z, right? But that's not what we make of Christianity. Right? It doesn't matter what you believe about him, as long as you believe him. That doesn't make sense at all. That doesn't make sense at all. Because these beliefs are what spells Jesus and that he saves. So Jesus asks today, what about you? Who do you say I am? And we could come to Jesus with whatever we think is right. But if we don't have the Old Testament, you'll never know. You'll never know. And because we don't understand the Old Testament well, we struggle with our assurance of salvation. One of the things that we struggle with as Adventists is on assurance of salvation. Like, am I saved? Right? Can you be 100% sure that if you die tonight, that you'll see Jesus coming in your house forward? Like 100%, there's no doubt in your mind. Like not maybe, not I hope. No, not like if it's God's will. No, none of that. Right? Are you 100% sure in your heart of hearts? And this is not a question you have to answer me for. It's a question you have to answer to yourself. But we cannot have our assurance of salvation while we are unclear about who this Jesus really is. And the Old Testament is what tells us who Jesus is. Let me give you an example. We believe that the New Testament says that when you believe in Jesus, what we're a new creation, right? That old things have passed away. Right? Everyone's equal. There's no free or bond, no male or female. Right? Everyone is equal in God. How can we be confident of that? We can be confident because in the Old Testament, Leviticus 25, verse 8, it talks about the Jubilee. It talks about the fact that after 7 years of 7 years of 7 years, I guess. 7 years, it comes out to 49, right? And it says after 49, at 50th year, it should be a Jubilee. Right? And what happened at the Jubilee? It didn't matter what kind of situation took you into slavery, you were set free. Right? It didn't matter if you lost your property during the 49 years, you got it back on the 50th year. Right? And if you got rich off of someone else's slavery, then what happened to you? You lost it, right? You just went back to where everyone else is. No one's a slave anymore, everyone's equal. Right? So, under the year of Jubilee, nobody got rich. So this idea of prosperity gospel, if you believe in Jesus, you're going to be rich, this is terrible. Right? If you believe in Jesus, everybody becomes equal. The 70-week prophecy, right? 70-week prophecy is 47 times 7. 490 years. At the end of that prophecy comes this guy. He says, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. And what am I supposed to do? He says, I'm here to preach liberty to the captive, right? To heal those who are lame. And Jesus gets his authority to do that from the Old Testament. Right? And he says, I am your Jubilee. Right? In me, doesn't matter what you were in before. Doesn't matter what kind of situation you're in because of your own fault. If you're in me, you get a new start. Right? Because if you look at the ministry of Jesus, he doesn't make anybody rich. He tells the rich people to give their wealth away to the poor. Right? And then those that cannot make wealth for themselves, he gives them the ability to make wealth. Because if they couldn't walk, he made them walk. They couldn't hear, they made them hear. And so everybody comes on equal plane. Right? That is a fulfillment of the Old Testament Jubilee. That's exactly what Jesus said he has come to do. And so our confidence in Jesus as the Messiah for what he will do for us is 100% based on the Old Testament. But if you don't know the Old Testament, if we're vague about that, what assurance do we have that we can be rescued from our situation? What assurance do we have that that Jesus is going to take us back over this side over again? There's just no way. There's no way. That is why we struggle with assurance of salvation. Because salvation has nothing to do with me. It's all about him. If he is a reliable Savior, then that's enough. The gospel had power because I was able to go to him and say, hey, Jesus saved a sinner like me, he saved you too. It wasn't like I tried hard and I'm saved. Therefore, if you try hard enough, you might get saved too. No. Jesus saved me, he can save you too. That is the power of the gospel. The power of the gospel is not what I've done, but what God has done for me. Maybe. But we cannot get that unless we have the Old Testament. Salvation is the one thing that we can be certain about. Right? That's the minimum. If you read the Old New Testament, I assure you, if you read the New Testament, the one thing that the writers take for granted is that Jesus is a sufficient Savior. That's the one message. If you miss that, you miss the entire New Testament completely. But the question is, where do I start? Right? The Old Testament is huge. I just showed you how big it was, right? Because it sounds like, my sister told me when I shared this with her, she's like, it almost sounds like we have to earn our salvation by reading. That's not the point. Right? The hardest math class in the US is called Math 55, right? The Harvard University Department of Mathematics describes Math 55 as probably the most difficult undergraduate math class in the country. The chances are I'm not going to make it in that class. Not because that class is impossible, but because I have not taken calculus. Right? I didn't do calculus in high school or college for that matter. So there's no way I would make it in that class. But that class is not impossible. People take it all the time. Right? But in order for you to survive in that class, you have to have taken addition, subtraction, multiplication, right? All these different classes, in a way, make up your preparation for that class. Is that clear, right? Because when you go into that class, the teacher is talking about whatever he's talking about, he's going to make reference to algebra, calculus, geometry, right? Trigonometry. And if you're sitting in class and you have no idea what that means, you're not going to make it. Right? And you're not at liberty to decide what the professor is saying. Right? You have to know what the professor is talking about. You have to have background knowledge. Is that clear? Yes? All right. So this is how it is. The Old Testament is more the raw material. Right? And then the New Testament is the building. In order for us to really appreciate what the building is about, we have to understand the raw material. Right? So let me try to explain it differently. Warren Buffett, the CEO of Berkshire Hathaway, when asked once about the key to his success, pointed to a stack of books and said, I read 500 pages like this every day. That's how knowledge works. It builds up like compound interest. All of you can do it, but I guarantee not many of you will do it. He says, when you read a lot, what happens in your brain is your brain starts organizing for you, right? So it kind of builds up a little bit at a time. And before you know it, your brain has a wealth of knowledge that you cannot gain just in a short amount of time. And he says this is important because I read and think. Buffett once said, so I do more reading and thinking and make less impulsive decisions than most people in business. I do it because I like this kind of life. The more you have in your brain, the more you're able to think through your decisions. And the more you have in your brain, the better decisions you're able to make. We look at ourselves, we look at our fellow church members and think, like, why in the world are they making these decisions? Right? Why are they so reactive? Why am I so reactive? Right? Why do I want to throw my baby out sideways crying? Right? Why do we have these thoughts? It's because we don't have the right information in our minds. Same thing with our Christian experience. The Pentateuch is God's high calling for humanity. Right? The Old Testament, the law, is what God originally intended. And then the historical books show how they utterly failed to live up to God's standard. And then the poetry expresses the human frailty and God's faithfulness in poetry language. Right? And then the prophets is Jesus' heart response to a human rebellion and human failure. That's the Jesus that came to earth. Right? There's no separation between the Old Testament God and the New Testament Jesus. It's the same Jesus. It's the same God. So in order for us to appreciate what Jesus did on earth, we have to understand what he did on earth prior to his coming. All right. The New Testament writers, they've organized exactly what the gospel is, right? The New Testament explains what the gospel is, right? Simply. But in order for us to understand and appreciate the significance of what the New Testament authors wrote, we must have the Old Testament in our memory banks. Right? Because when they quoted and made reference to the Old Testament, they assumed that their readers would know what they were talking about. They expected the readers to understand what they wrote. They consistently took for granted their audience and their readers knew the Old Testament as well as they did. But we don't. Our understanding of the Old Testament cannot be perfect. It cannot be perfect, but must be thorough. Because if you look, am I going over time?
You good?
All right, I'll try to wrap up. So, the New Testament, just like Matt 55, right? It's a combination of all the Old Testament books. Because if you read the New Testament, right? You read the New Testament, consistently make references to the Old Testament. So when they make quotes, the New Testament authors like the readers will know what I'm talking about. The readers will know why I picked this. But we're reading thinking, okay, why is that there? For example, when Jesus said, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, like, my God, why have you forsaken me? We think of that as a sound of defeat. But for Jesus, he knew the entire Psalms from which that was quoted. That quote, that psalm begins with, my God, why have you forsaken me? But that psalm ends with God being victorious. So when the New Testament writers quote the Old Testament, they have an entire context in which their readers knew. You see, when we read the New Testament, it can sound confusing. And we try to make things up as to what it means. That's why we have so many churches. We can't afford it. Okay, so why did Jesus not reveal himself to be Jesus at first? That's Elvis, Hitler, and Tupac. Right? I asked my church what they have in common. They were like, oh, they're all men. I was like, oh, I changed my question. But no, they all died. But there are claims of his sightings throughout history. Right? Some people claim that they saw Hitler in Argentina. Some people believe that Elvis didn't die in 1977. We're not sure what that is. And people believe that Tupac never died. But let me ask you, why were they not able to start a religion like Jesus did? Right? Because Jesus, again, died and came back to life. They started a religion. They did. What made a difference? It says, had he first made himself known to them, their hearts would have been satisfied, right? The disciples would be happy. But in the fullness of their joy, they would have one hunger for nothing more. But it was necessary for them to understand the witness borne to him of the types and prophecies of the Old Testament. Upon these, their faith must be established. Christ performed no miracle to convince them, but it was his first work to explain the scriptures. They had looked upon his death as the destruction of all their hopes. Now he showed from the prophets that this was a very strong sentence for their faith. Let me try to explain this in a way that hopefully will make more sense. Let's say Orlando died, right? Orlando dies, but he comes back from the dead, right? Popped up. And so I see him, right? I met him after he came back from the dead. So I said, hey, Orlando's alive. Orlando's alive. He's going to look at me and say, are you crazy? And I'm like, no, you gotta believe me, Orlando's alive. And then the question is, what's the chance of him believing me? He might say, oh, he's a pastor, if you know what he's talking about, he must not be crazy. So he may say, okay, Pastor Daniels, I can trust him. Maybe Orlando is alive. So he goes home and tells his wife, hey, Pastor Daniel told me that Orlando is alive. And she's going to think he's crazy for believing me. Right? How is it any different with Jesus? The disciples could have claimed that they saw Jesus in heaven. But to transfer that to somebody else, in thousands, right? That's not possible. Because in order for Jesus to convince thousands of people that Jesus had come back from the dead, what does he have to do? He has to what? He has to prove it to every single person. Right? There's no validity to my witness of Orlando's resurrection. Right? You have to see Orlando for yourself, or you will never believe that he's alive. Same thing with the disciples of Jesus. They had no credibility to prove to somebody else that Jesus is alive. And further on, more and more. There's just no way. So if Jesus just showed them, hey, I'm Jesus, they would have been satisfied, but there would have been no way for them to explain to Jesus is alive. Right? Jesus is the Messiah, he said he would do this, Isaiah said this, Moses said this, right? The list goes on and on and on. And so they're listening, wait. Yeah. That's what was supposed to happen to Jesus. And so what we're expecting next is for him to come back from the dead. And the story ends with Jesus saying, and then Jesus opening their eyes, and they're like, that's it. On the contrary, their knowledge made their excitement a reality. And when they preached to other people after the Pentecost, it had power. Because they knew the Old Testament and they knew Jesus, and it all made sense. So what does it mean to know Jesus? We have to know the Old Testament in order to properly appreciate the New Testament, so we could explain it to people in such a way that will encourage them to look at the Scriptures. Because if we give them rounded, cliche ideas, they'll be content with them. Because how many people in this world are content with this idea of just believing in Jesus? But they don't feel the need to search for it. Guys, there are serious consequences for that. We are called to be ambassadors for Christ. We're called to be witnesses for Christ. But if we give them rounded ideas that satisfy them, but don't point them to search the Scriptures more, we have failed. And so the first part is just read the Old Testament. Right? Just read it as much as you can. I've been reading the Old Testament. I read the whole Bible through and through like 10 times. But I was like, I should understand the New Testament, Old Testament better. Because I believe that the Old Testament was meant to be read, and the New Testament meant to be studied. There's a difference. But we can't understand the New Testament unless we have the Old Testament. And so this is what I wrote as a result. Or maybe one more quote. It is the voice of Christ that speaks through patriarchs and prophets from the days of Adam and Eve, even to the closing scenes of time. The Savior is revealed in the Old Testament as clearly as in the New. I've heard people say, like, why do we focus on the Old Testament so much? Because shouldn't we focus on Jesus? No. The Savior is revealed in the Old Testament as well as in the New Testament. It is the light that from the prophetic past that brings out the life of Christ and the teachings of the New Testament with clearness and beauty. The miracles of Christ are a proof of his deity, but a stronger proof that he is the world's Redeemer is found in comparing the prophecies of the Old Testament with the history of the New. He's already discovered that anyway. This is what I wrote. It wasn't his plan to merely comfort his disciples. They were to be his medium for Christianity's world domination. And you cannot do that just by hearsay. Let me read something let's open the Bible together, and hopefully this will nail the coffin in this place. Luke 16, and I am done. Sorry, I didn't realize this. Luke 16, and we're talking about the parable of Lazarus, right? Parable of Lazarus, and we're reading in verse 27. So after the rich man tries to convince Abraham to give him some water, in verse 27, he said, "Then I beg you, Father, that you send him, Lazarus, my father's house. For I have 5 brothers, in order that he may warn them so that they will not also come to this place of torment." Right? So think with me, logic, right? If somebody dies, send Lazarus back in so he can convince my siblings so that they don't come to this place. Well, even though that sounds brilliant, what does Abraham say in response? Verse 29, but Abraham said, "They have Moses and the prophets." Right? Let them hear them. But he said, "No, Father Abraham, but if someone goes, they will repent." Guys, there's only one person, but this is what it says. But he says that if they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, they will not be persuaded, even what? Even if somebody comes back from the dead. This is Jesus telling this story, right? So he says, if you don't believe in Moses and the prophets properly, even if I come back from the dead, it will not be sufficient. So me coming back from the dead has power only when it's supported by me. These are the words of Jesus. This is not me making this up. There's a story of HMS Richards. I'm sure you've heard of him. You may not have. But he was a very well-known pastor. And he read the Bible so many times and he memorized big chunks of it. And so when he preached, he would preach from memory and not by opening the text. And some people came to him and said, "Pastor, like, you shouldn't be such a show-off, right? You know, because you make us feel bad. Right? So don't quote, just read the Bible to us." So he's like, okay, I'll do that. Right? So he would be reading, but he's looking at saying it from memory. But everyone knew that he was doing it from memory. You know why? The Bible is upside down. Right? Because he was saying it from memory, it didn't matter which way the letters were facing. That's how well he knew the Bible. There was an interview done with him by this guy. So it was on a CD, so I listened to it for a while. And in the interview, the guy asks him, "Pastor, if you could redo ministry again, right? If you can start over again, what would you do differently? Because what would you tell our young pastors that would help them in the ministry?" And this is HMS Richards. He knows the Bible through and through. You know what his answer was? "I wish I read my Bible more." Because it is the Bible that tells us who Jesus is. You see, we're not at liberty to decide what we think Jesus is like. Because we do that all the time. The churches split, hate each other, but they both claim to believe in Jesus. Which Jesus are you believing? It must have nothing to do with God. But we won't know that unless we open the Bible for ourselves. So I challenge you. I'm sorry. But I challenge you. Spend time reading the Bible. Spend time reading the Old Testament. And I promise you, when you open the New Testament, it'll make a whole lot more sense. What I do is I for a while, I was reading the Old Testament, I was listening to the New Testament as I was driving. And my mind is moving on. I was like, wow, I didn't see that before. But because I knew what the Old Testament was talking about, the New Testament statement made a lot more sense. Right? But I'm not content with that. As a pastor, my job is to point people to Jesus properly. It's one thing if one of us misleads somebody. It's something else different if I do that. Right? I need to know my Bible well. But that responsibility rests on all. It rests on all of us. As long as we can read, we can know Jesus. Well, if you can't read, the Bible's not what we can see. That's fine. Father in heaven, it was a bit long sermon than I expected. But I hope that the message is clear. That we cannot rest with vague ideas of what it means to believe in Jesus. That precludes or excludes anything we don't like. But Lord, we've seen from Scripture that even if somebody comes back from the dead, if they don't believe most of the prophets, they won't believe them. And Lord, how often do we, as Christians and Adventists, while claiming to believe in the man that came back from the dead, our lives are unchanged? Could it be because we don't believe most of the prophets properly? Well, I hope that was clear for everyone here and for myself. To search the Scriptures once again. In Jesus' name, amen.